Okay, let's jump right into this explainer. I want to start by painting a pretty vivid picture for you, straight from our source material. So imagine an entrepreneur. They've slipped and they've fallen off the edge of this massive jagged cliff. But miraculously, on their way down, they managed to grab onto the very end of a vine. So they're just hanging there, 1,000 feet from the top, 1,000 feet from the bottom. The situation is completely hopeless. In a moment of sheer desperation, this entrepreneur looks up to the clouds and decides for the very first time in their life to pray. Is anybody up there? After this long, agonizing silence, a deep, booming voice bellows down from the clouds. Do you believe? The entrepreneur shouts back, yes, yes, I believe. The voice replies, then let go of the vine.
The entrepreneur pauses for a second, looks back up at the clouds, and finally responds, is there anybody else up there? Now, it's a hilarious response, sure, but it hits the nail on the head. It perfectly highlights this stubborn illusion of control that holds so many business owners back. I mean, most leaders are totally unable to reach the next level of success simply because they are absolutely terrified to let go of that vine. You might actually know this exact feeling. You desperately want your business to grow, but at the exact same time you're frustrated, you're exhausted, and you're entirely unwilling to take on any more risk or surrender even an ounce of control. So if you're feeling that bone-deep exhaustion right now, you really need to internalize this one core truth. You are not your business. Your business is an entity in and of itself. Yes, obviously you created it, but to find true, scalable success, you have to turn it into a self-sustaining organism. Reaching that next level, it absolutely requires separating your personal identity from the daily operations of the company. It requires building strong guiding principles, systems, and tools that work day in and day out, whether you're physically sitting in the building or taking a month off. Because when you don't separate yourself, the signs that you're clinging to the vine become glaringly obvious to everyone around you. There's this story in the material about a leader who was holding on for dear life. He had his hands in literally every single aspect of his business. His makeshift leadership team was a total sham because, behind the scenes, he was still pulling all the strings. Basically, he was acting like a dictator. On top of that, he was logging 80-hour work weeks. He was so overworked and pushed to the absolute brink that he actually started nodding off during his own company meetings. He had literally become a zombie. Sure, sheer force of will had gotten him far, but it had created this incredibly frustrating plateau where growth just completely stalled out.
But hey, here is the good news. The universe isn't asking you to just drop into an endless abyss. It's asking you to drop into a system. Before you can truly grow, you have to take a leap of faith built on 4 fundamental beliefs. And these are building a true leadership team, understanding that hitting the ceiling is inevitable, running on one operating system, and finally, being open-minded, growth-oriented, and vulnerable. If you can accept these 4 principles, you'll finally be ready to let go of that vine. So, let's break them down real quick, starting with the first one.
Ultimately, you have a choice in how you run your business. You can run a dictatorship, or you can build a true leadership team. Now, both methods can technically work for a little while, but dictatorships are completely exhausting and they absolutely preclude future growth. It's just simple math, right? One person can only make so many decisions and solve so many problems in a single 24-hour day. You simply cannot build an enduring organization if it's designed to crumble the minute you step aside. Instead, you need a healthy leadership team approach. You need a team of people who define the company's vision with you, who take real initiative over their departments, and who present a united front to the rest of the organization.
And once you have that solid team in place, you have to accept a somewhat hard truth, and this is our second belief. Hitting the ceiling is completely inevitable. Listen, organizations expand in spurts. They grow, and then they smash right into a natural ceiling. This is not a sign of failure. Actually, scratch that, it's the exact opposite. It's a healthy, inevitable byproduct of expansion. Reaching the natural limits of your existing resources literally forces an organization to adjust in order to survive. And this happens on 3 levels, as a whole organization, within specific departments, and even down to the individual level. When you hit this ceiling, growth is your only option. Because if you aren't growing, well, you're dying.
So the crucial point here is that to break through this inevitable ceiling, you have to rely on your ability to delegate. You must delegate and elevate to your true God-given skill set. Just think about it. As your company grows, it's no longer practical or even possible, really, for you to remain the chef, the head waiter, and the dishwasher all at the same time. By stubbornly hanging on to all those tiny day-to-day details, you are actually constricting your company's growth. You have to let go of the operational tasks, delegate them to capable people, and elevate yourself so you can take the long view.
But you might be wondering, what happens when you delegate to someone and they just aren't the right fit? Well, there's this great anecdote about the author and his brothers.
Their parents went out of town and left them in charge of their mom's prized houseplant. Naturally, they forgot to water it, and it started dying. Their brilliant solution? Just flood the poor thing with water. Obviously, that didn't work. But when their mom returned, she didn't just overwater it again. She simply grabbed a pair of scissors and pruned the dying limbs. And boom, the plant quickly came back to life. In your business, merely hoping poorly fitting people will magically improve, giving them pep talks or sending them to seminars, is exactly like overwatering a dying plant. Sometimes targeted cuts and difficult personnel changes are exactly what the organization needs to flourish again.
Now, to know exactly what to prune and how to manage all this, you have to adopt the third belief. You can only run your business on one single operating system. This is where the Entrepreneurial Operating System, or EOS, comes into play. As one business owner put it, they used to worry about 100 different things, just spinning plates constantly. But once they realized their business was simply made up of 6 key components: vision, people, data, issues, process, and traction, and they focused only on those 100 worries just melted away. You absolutely must have one abiding vision, one culture, and one concrete framework that puts everyone on the exact same page. And to really understand why this is so critical, imagine taking a handful of incredibly talented leaders. I'm talking top-tier CEOs, marketing directors, finance wizards, and putting them all on one team. You'd bet on their success, right? But here's the catch. Even highly talented leaders will fail if they're operating at cross purposes. So often, 2 smart people are speaking completely different languages. One says, "What are your objectives?" The other replies, "Wait, you mean my goals?" One asks for a process, the other calls it a system. Imagine trying to coach a sports team with 2 distinct rulebooks, or running a country with 2 different governments. It's absolute chaos. You cannot build a great organization on multiple operating systems. You need one unified voice. And all of this builds up to our ultimate foundation, which is captured perfectly by the late Dr. David Viscott. He said, "If you cannot risk, you cannot grow. If you cannot grow, you cannot become your best." I love that. It perfectly encapsulates our 4th and final fundamental belief. You must be open-minded, growth-oriented, and totally vulnerable. Listen, this is a non-negotiable requirement for long-term growth. If you don't know something, you just have to admit that you don't know it. You have to be willing to ask and genuinely receive help from others.
Basically, you have to let your guard down to see your organization for what it truly is. Leaders absolutely must drop the facade of having all the answers. A leader who feels they can never be wrong is just completely missing the point. When your arms are folded and the wall is up, there's no getting in. The mind is exactly like a parachute. It really only works when it's open. In fact, a closed-minded leadership team that refuses to admit their weaknesses or face reality, that is the absolute biggest warning sign that a company simply isn't ready to scale.
Which brings us right back to the ultimate question. We've talked about the illusion of control, the need to build a real team, accepting that inevitable ceiling, relying on one unified system, and embracing deep, real vulnerability. These are the mandatory steps if you want to transition from being an exhausted dictator to a true leader. But look, none of it works if you're still looking up at the clouds, hoping someone else will magically fix it for you. So I'll leave you with this to think about. Are you going to keep hanging there, frozen by the fear of losing control? Or are you finally ready to let go of the vine?